the word polar bear in various languages around the Arctic Circle. So of course we have polar bear in English pointing to this Canadian part of the Arctic Circle. Then we have Nanook, which I feel like I've seen before. There's also a very similar word for these animals in Greenland, at least the native part. But of course Greenland is controlled by Denmark. This is their Danish word for it. Norway has this really high up island kind of next to Greenland. Denmark and Greenland use the same word for polar bear. Here's the Russian term, the Chukchi as well. And I'm starting to notice a pattern specifically like in the western part of the Arctic Circle. It's all like some sort of nan and then either with a Q or with a K. I actually didn't even realize how many languages there are up here. Nanook in Czech and Slovakia is popsicle. That's kind of ironic. I've seen many of these maps showing the true size of Africa. This is the true size of Latin America though. I feel like this first example just shows truly how large Russia actually is. It is longer and almost as thick as this entire continent. But then this image shows just how giant South America is. Driving from the coast of Peru to Brazil, which I don't even think it's possible to go through the Amazon rainforest like that. It's like driving from California to New York. Alaska's like the size of Mexico. Canada's the second largest country by land area, but still looks like Brazil really rivals it. We have China, which is similar to the US in size. And then all of Europe. This looks so small. I'm always shocked at how small this continent actually is, and yet it just contains so much history and culture, so much chaos. And then India looks to be about the size of Argentina. There's a lot of like similarities. If Argentina just like annexed Chile. Now these maps weren't just including South America, as you can see, it's all of Latin America, the Caribbean and Mexico, all of Central America as well. And to think two pretty small countries in an already pretty small continent was able to conquer that entire region. So Spain and Portugal got literally all of this, all of it. Comparing the best-selling vehicle in Europe versus the best-selling vehicle in the US. And already you can notice there is a massive difference. This truck looks especially big, but I think in reality this European vehicle is actually just really small. So the best-selling vehicle in Europe is this Fiat Panda, and I feel like I've never seen this in my entire life, versus the Ford F-150. And I think this is showing how long it's been the best-selling vehicles from 2014 to present, whereas the Fiat Panda was pretty much ruling for like 10 years. So I don't know if this is true, but I've always heard that in Europe, their cars are smaller because just gas prices are insanely high. Here in the US, we're starting to catch up to them though. Honestly, there's a lot of parts of Europe where you could not physically bring in a Ford F-150. It is just way too big. Roads are way too small. The parking spots are really tiny. Like it's kind of just a disaster waiting to happen. Another popular car in Europe, or maybe a more popular car in Europe, is the Volkswagen Golf. Not quite as tiny. Obviously, still pretty small though. Body height reported by US men. Oh no. So this was a health survey that asked men about how tall are you without shoes. So right off the bat, you can tell some funky things are happening here. 13% reported to be 5'10", and another 13% reported to be 6 foot. Only 11% of 200,000 men reported to be 5'11". I'm wondering how many people rounded down. The men that are 6'1", is it just easier just to say 6? Look as the data jumps between 5'4", 5'5", 5'6". It jumps by like 3 to 2 percentile. I feel like these are the only honest dudes on this entire chart, the 11% that actually said they're 5'11". You could trust those guys to be the most honest people you'll ever talk to. In reality, that graph should have peaked at about 5'9", but as you can see, that clearly was not the case. This map is showing us all the male height by state. Some of the taller states happen to be Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, and my birth state, Alabama. What happened to me? The average male height in Alabama is 5'10". This looks like it's just like population based though. Some of the more populated areas tend to be lower on the list. California, Texas, Florida, New York, and the less populated areas are taller. The Japanese caste system, which was used up until 1871 until it modernized. I remember learning about this in like the 6th grade. So at the top, we have the Japanese emperor, even though he had little real power. Right below that, we have shoguns and the daimyo. Daimyo were wealthy landowners, whereas shoguns were the actual rulers of Japan. I thought there were multiple shoguns at one time. Was that how the Civil War started? We have the samurai warriors. We know all about them. Were Japanese warriors. Depending on the time period, I don't know if they were necessarily using blades. They really like to shoot things. The largest class, or the peasants and artisans. And then finally here at the very bottom, we have merchants. They are the lowest class because they produce nothing on their own. So for the most part, you either just want to be a peasant or a samurai warrior. Those are your two options, because you're probably not going to make it to shogun or daimyo. Or how do you become an emperor? Throughout the pyramid in a bit more detail, the shogun was actually ahead of the daimyos, and then this ronin class here was above the peasants. I guess they were warriors or samurai, but without a master, offering services to anyone that needs a sword. Oh, they're like mercenaries. I feel like my knowledge of Japanese history could really use some work, especially when so many other people know it. Currency is weakening relative to the US dollar. So by March 2022, we have Turkey going way down there. I remember that being all a part of the memes. Argentina also way down. Japan pretty high up there. We have actually a couple that are going up. Is that... Oh, that's South Africa. Some are kind of switching back and forth, and now as we approach September 2020, Argentina, Turkey continue to just plummet. We have Hungary, Sweden, the UK, Japan. On the opposite side of thing, Indonesia seems to be doing pretty well, only dropping 5%. I feel like I haven't seen enough memes about Argentina's currency dropping. I've seen a bunch about Turkey though. Looks like I need to take a vacation to Argentina ASAP. See what my grandpa's up to. Here are the largest banks in the world and their country of origin. ING is from the Netherlands. It all makes sense now. I feel like ING is pretty big in America. We have a Japanese bank, an Italian bank, and a Chinese bank. We have 2 Canadians and a UK. We have Goldman Sachs from the US, another Chinese bank, and a German bank. Another Chinese bank. We approach the top, we get a little bit more familiar names. Wells Fargo, Citigroup, those are both American. Here's Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase. I didn't know JP Morgan Chase is bigger than Bank of America. And then Japan's biggest bank, Mitsubishi. Finally, the top 4 on the list are all Chinese banks. Bank of China, Agricultural Bank of China, China Construction Bank, I don't know what that is. Industrial Commercial Bank of China. Now, is this because they have less banks, so there's pretty much less options? Like, I know there's some really small banks that didn't hit this list that are in the US. It's actually pretty surprising to see 2 Canadian banks make the list, and some of the other low population countries like the Netherlands, they're only at 17 million, punching way above their own weight. That actually explains why so many Chinese banks are at the top of the list. There's like 1.3 billion people living in China. But the fact that these top 4 all have over $400 trillion in assets, and the top one's almost at 6 trillion, this is what I'm saying. I just had the biggest revelation with that orange lion. How does one start a bank? Can I do one of those? The largest countries in the world by land area, literally just made a reference to this. Russia #1 and Canada's #2. And also, like I said, USA and China, very similar. But I wonder how low we drop on the list if you didn't include Alaska, because that really pulls us up there. The lower 48 states would occupy about 8 million squared kilometers, which would actually drop us behind the 5th place, Brazil, and just a little bit ahead of Australia in 6th. So it's actually not that much of a drop. It's actually a huge drop off with Australia at 7 and India that's only at 3. Then Argentina and Kazakhstan. Had no idea Kazakhstan was ranking so high on the list, but I should have. They're pretty thick. Also didn't know that Algeria was technically the 10th largest country in the world. Again, flat maps strike again, because most map projections make Africa much smaller than it actually is, and they make Europe much larger. But yeah, you can see Algeria's real big. On a globe perspective, you can see it's actually a lot larger than everything in Europe by far. But there's actually a lot of huge countries in Africa. I mean, look at the Congo, look at Sudan. Libya is actually the next biggest country in Africa, then Mali, then South Africa. Actually, look at all the green squares. This just shows you how large so many of the African countries really are. I actually didn't realize just how close Africa is to Asia in terms of squared kilometers. It's only about 1 million away. Asia looks huge. I didn't think Africa was that close to it. Again, the maps don't give it justice. Oceania is only a total of 8 million squared kilometers, and yet 7.7 million is occupied by Australia. At a glance, this looks like the west coast of North America with Canada, the US, and Mexico. But with a closer look, you can actually see it's Turkey, even down to like the Gulf of Mexico and like Baja California. And then the way this curves, it looks like California, Washington, Oregon, moves over this way to show like Alaska. This is so odd. This is actually the Black Sea, so we're turning the map by like 90 degrees, but this is amazing. What's also pretty weird is I feel like the vegetation or the lack thereof is similar too. I mean, this is a lot of green for California. California's not that green, but there is a lot of green over here, and then less so where like Wyoming would be and stuff. Is this a sign that Californians should do some sort of crusades against Tijuana, Mexico? There is one country missing on this map. Can you identify which one it is? First place I look towards is New Zealand. Somehow they remembered that. It's amazing. What's going on with these lines? Oh, these are like argued lands or whatever. Please don't tell me it's in Africa, because I'm probably not going to be able to get it. Is it the Vatican City? Because there is a dot for San Marino, but I don't see anything for the Vatican. But I also don't see much for like Andorra, Monaco, or Liechtenstein. Let me just keep checking to see if I can find anything else. I think South America would be way too noticeable. Yeah, that looks pretty much the same. Could have maybe slipped me up in Central America, but that looks all right too. Is there an island missing? Please don't tell me it's a random island. That would just be mean. Is it Malta or something? And it better not be anything in the Pacific coast. Oh man, I'm so scared. Oh, it's Cyprus. It's got to be Cyprus, right? I don't think they meant the Vatican, but yeah, there's literally no Cyprus island. That's got to be it. Cyprus, final answer. Oh. I actually didn't even check that. Yeah, see, if you play this game, you gotta upload the map in like super high quality, but yeah, those islands are not there technically. But Cyprus was, I think, the original like intended answer. Or wait a second, was it supposed to be Kosovo? There was actually a couple correct answers for this one. Here is the continent of Asia at night. Love these maps because they really show you just how well certain areas are developed and how other areas aren't. Like the most dramatic has to be from South Korea to North Korea. It just seems to be like a small light here in Pyongyang where, look at South Korea. Like what is it? Are these boats? Are the boats it's really transmitting that much light. Also, I've talked about this before, but it really just shows how well developed China is along the coast, and then the more inland you go, yeah, not so much. It's like nothing in Tibet. India's got a bunch going on. Of course, their densely populated area up here, it's where the most light's emitted. Pakistan is surprisingly kind of dim here. Didn't even realize that more of the northeast corner of the Arabian Peninsula contains more light than like the south. I know that most of Saudi Arabian population comes here, but there's just a lot going on in the Persian Gulf. A lot from Iran, a lot from Iraq. Why does the light have different sort of like, there's like this blurry light, and then if you look at like Israel, more detailed, looks like a lot of people live along the coast of the Caspian Sea down here. And then of course there's big mother Russia, where they have a lot of light out here in the west and then almost nothing in east. This is why they made so many prison camps over here. There's just so much to look at on this map. Look at Indonesia. I didn't realize that this is where all the light was. I know there's a huge forest on this island, and I think this area is pretty vegetation as well. Look at Singapore right here. Also, Thailand seems to be the big bright forest in Southeast Asia. Crazy that this image contains at least 60% of the world's population, maybe even a bit more. Number of urban areas with more than 5 million inhabitants. So here in the US we have 9, probably like LA, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, I don't know. I wish it would tell us all. The only other country that matches us in the Western Hemisphere is Brazil. I'm surprised that Europe doesn't have more of this, but these countries are pretty small in terms of land area and population, things like that. So Africa and Europe. Nigeria's the only one with 2 in this whole area. And as we've seen, a lot of people live in Asia. 17 from China. 17 urban areas with over 5 million people. And then I'm sure India, who's only going to catch up to them. Australia surprisingly has 2, but that's because like all Australians live in just 1 or 2 different spots, and then the rest of the continent is just desert. Where does this one come? Is this one supposed to be Singapore? I'm actually surprised there isn't more. Like Russia only has 2 in this whole region. Every country with 2 or more cities above 5 million have over 100 million people. The one exception is Australia at 25 million people. That means 2/5 of Australian population live in one of those 2 cities. Australia's got to be like one of the least densely populated countries on Earth. It's actually Greenland at number 1, then Mongolia, Namibia, and then Australia. Are Russians allowed to enter your country? I didn't even realize Russians weren't allowed to go to certain countries. So for most of Europe, it's yes, but with visa. But then with certain European countries that have had an interesting history with Russia, they're just saying straight up no. Which if you know about the past with these places, this shouldn't be too surprising. A lot of the former Yugoslavian states are just straight up saying yes, as well as San Marino and Andorra. Caucasus Mountain region and Turkey are all just saying yes, as well as Kazakhstan and Belarus. There's got to be an explanation for Ukraine here, and I just can't think of it. Something to keep in mind though is this is specifically referencing tourism and like legal tourism. Like you can go there illegally, of course. And I feel like some of the countries that allow with visa doesn't mean they're gonna get accepted with a visa. And big thanks to my wife hates this part.
My name is Walter Hartwell White.
Drew's Argentinian grandpa. California and Nevada bring back Poland ball. Mexican $20 is a lot. Chris Danny Evan Pryce Gamers LuxembourgLover Matt Philipp RF Phresh Animations and Why Am I Doing This?